one of the fundamental emotions that can be turned on like a dial is your curiosity. And curiosity can override fear or anxiety, especially when you're talking about moments. And so I wrote about this in my first year. And so right from the beginning, I didn't articulate it as well as I do now, is like, this is a strategy to deal with threats, difficulties, and challenges. And it's not that it takes us away from it. It changes our mindset for how we enter situations. And I think if you view curiosity as one of the greatest psychological tools that costs nothing other than time, a slight bit of time and energy, in terms of the wide-ranging benefits, this is just something people have to be talking about on a regular basis in every single life domain.
Have you ever noticed how often the most important challenges at work aren't really about skill or strategy, but about how we understand ourselves, other people, and what actually drives human behavior? Motivation, status, relationships, conflict, purpose. And what if one of the most powerful tools for navigating all of that wasn't confidence or control, but curiosity? Welcome to the Science for Work podcast, where we explore evidence-based insights from IO psychology and HR management to help make work better. I'm your host, Matt Lampe. In today's episode, I'm joined by Dr. Todd Kashdan, a leading researcher on curiosity, meaning, and psychological flexibility, and someone whose work has shaped how many of us think about motivation, well-being, and growth at work and in life. We use curiosity as a lens for exploring a wide range of questions about work and human behavior. We talk about how curiosity can override fear and anxiety, how it shapes the way we build relationships and lead others, and why understanding what truly motivates people is often more complicated and more human than we expect. We explore how curiosity connects to conflict, to leadership, and to the way we think about purpose and legacy across the course of a career, including what it really means to stay open, curious, and engaged over time. If you're a leader, a manager, a practitioner, or simply someone interested in how curiosity can help you work, lead, and live a little better, I think you'll find a lot of value in this conversation with Dr. Todd Kashdan. Todd Kashdan, welcome to the Science for Work podcast. It's good to have you here. Finally, get to ask you some questions.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Yeah. So you write a lot about curiosity. Actually, before we get into all that, for those who don't know who you are, can you tell us a little about who you are, the kind of work that you study, the type of work that you do?
Yeah, I like to say that I was in the well-being game before it was cool. So in 1998, the year positive psychology was formed. That's when I started studying this well-being science, and I formed the well-being laboratory in 1999. So it's been 27 years, and we study everything that you want to talk about at a party: friendships, romantic relationships, social anxiety, stress, resilience, purpose in life, happiness, curiosity, creativity, you name it, we study it.
Man, that's awesome. So many different ways to go with that. And when we look at how all of that impacts the workplace, the reality of it is there's not a work version of me and a home version of me. I mean, to an extent, maybe there is, but for the most part, when we talk well-being, it's not just well-being at work, it's well-being in life. Curiosity, not at work, but curiosity in general.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the mistakes that people make is the notion of, I'm going to turn it off and then enter the workspace. I'm going to dream of having a 15-minute commute to go to work so I can transition to this space. And in reality is the thing you really have to be doing is deciding is, what am I going to save for myself in the workspace so that you don't get all of me? And what am I going to do when I come home so that I can be fully there with my friends, partners, kids, neighbors, hobbies, interests? And I think one of the mistakes people make is there's an obsession about being authentic, which we can go in that direction if we want to, in the workplace or not. It's really just about no one sees the full 100% of you because you don't know the full 100% of you. And then the other one is there's so much conversation about having, work-life balance, flexibility. But really the question is what are the parts of their self that you are most capable of and most enjoy, that you want to expose and make sure it comes to fruition in each life domain.
So let's go down that vein a little bit. You talk about authenticity. What when you look at work environment specifically, what do you think is often, and you sort of alluded to this a little bit, what do you think is often misunderstood or misapplied in that notion of authentic, especially, certain buzzwords, authentic leadership or authentic self at work? There's trending, but then there's also, what have you seen over the years with all the research that you do?
Yeah, I think let me talk about something that I think doesn't get discussed often, because that makes these conversations the most exciting. Is in the workplace environment is one of the most explicit, very clear, and even the rules of engagement are usually structured in a handbook or in meetings, in terms of like, this is a social status game. If you do the right things, you get prestige, admiration, points, time off for the things you don't want to do, time on for the things that you want to do. You get released from some of the obligations that are annoying. You get anointed for, you know, the closer parking space, the bigger office, more attention that happens there. So in this type of environment, there's no such thing as being authentic, because the gamemanship is so freaking clear. And then what we know is that when you are in a non-zero sum game, which is exactly what the workplace is, no matter what you say about diversity, equity, inclusion, meritocracy, choose your favorite term, is there are insufficient number of spaces for the hardworking people that exist there. And there's an unequal distribution for the skills and capabilities of the people that are in a particular workplace. So with all of that as background, there is no possible way to be authentic. So it really comes down to what is the best way for you to show up to work towards the goals that are of primacy to you, and not making sure to automatically upload what are the goals that are being pushed upon me or thrust upon me or discussed most often by other people, which are not mine, but I'm sort of accidentally absorbing them.
So when you take that approach, what does that look like?
So it's actually a really great question. Is you want to be clear of what is being thrust upon me. What do I have a thumbs up towards? What do I have a thumbs up down towards? So that's part one, is the external stimulation that's coming to you. Then you have internally inside you, like, what are you truly driven towards? And this is a really tough question because, most of us who are in the workplace are far flung from our childhood years. And so culture has like been like just beaten into our bones, whether we want it or not. So if the way I like to think about it is this way: if no one ever found out what you do in the workplace and what you do as someone who works, what would you want to be guided by? Would it be finances and money? Which is fine. That's perfectly fine. But be honest with yourself. Is it about status? Do you love like the idea that people are looking up towards you and like, oh my God, I can't wait till I'm Matt when I grow up? Is it end up being connection, where you just like really want to like really have like these deep, meaningful, powerful like interactions with people and know that you belong, that happens there? Is it end up being vengeance, where you just want to be really better off than people who remind you of bullies and annoying people from your young years, or maybe you work with all those people from your young years that happen there? And just be really clear internally, like what drives you. And if it deviates from what's typical for other people, just check in to see. If you're not stepping on other people's well-being, I would say let whatever guides you guides you.
Okay, so I'm going to shift a little bit. So if that's the approach or the mindset that people take into the workplace, stepping into a different role, the manager or the leader who is trying to, they're held to certain accountability standards on performance, production, whatever it might be. What does it look like for them to communicate that type of mindset to their employees? Like, not just tell them here's what I want, but show them, demonstrate it, and cultivate whatever. What does it look like for them to be able to reinforce that, so that that is the message? It's not just message heard, but now your message is being seen and people are actually leaning into that.
Yeah. So first of all, what I just described is rare. Not
Yeah.
enough people do this because
Right.
most of us don't have the bandwidth, and most of us didn't get the prompt. I never got the prompt in my first 30 years in the workplace. I wish somebody did. In terms for a manager, the simplest way I would describe it, which doesn't capture everything that I want to say, is there needs to be a little bit more personalization. It has to be individualized. And so I think of it more of this way. Now, of course, this is different if you have, depending on how many people are under your tutelage. If you've got 1,000 people, you're in a military operation. That's very different than having 30 people in the workplace. Let's assume, for the benefit of the doubt, we're talking about 20 to 30 people. So in this case, there is a small enough number where you can say, here's a form, or we can meet one-on-one, whichever one works for your personality, works best. Do know it's just going to be between us. Do know that even though people say this and they don't actually do it, this is not about your performance evaluation. This is about me figuring out what are the best levers and buttons that work for you to get you your best capable work without interfering with other people's work. Right? Same thing about like your well-being, but also not stepping on other people's well-being. And then you could have people write down like, what is it that would motivate you the most in terms of get you to do the hard work, get you to do the long-term work where you don't feel that positive reinforcement right off the bat. And for some people, it's going to be very clearly about money. And so if you're going to be a manager, be open to that. That's probably going to be the majority of people because of the way society is right now, especially in the United States, and other parts of the world. And you have to leave room for people to have less socially desirable motivations, right? I mentioned vengeance. I mentioned about kind of just like seeking status, seeking approval. You have to give people an opening where they can say the exact thing that they care about and not say the thing that they think you want to hear. Because it doesn't sound cool to say, I really like to win people's approval. I really like the idea of being like as high up the rung as I could possibly get on the social hierarchy that happens there. That doesn't sound socially desirable. So they'll suppress that, conceal that, and hide that. So you have to provide some sort of a form where people can say that. And when they do, you don't try to change it. You say exactly what your question is. How would that look like that I can make the work life easier for you so that you can get those status points that you desire? And what am I doing wrong right now that's getting in your way? And the beauty of that last question is I just gave you room to say, in some ways, I know I suck. I want you to point to me about something that sucks.
Couple things. One, you're right. I think this is very rare. This doesn't happen in the workplace as often as it could. And when it does, I like, to me, that is an element of well-being because it's supporting the individual person in that setting, in that particular setting. I don't know. Thoughts
Yeah,
around that?
just having the conversation is saying, I am not imposing who I think you are. I have basically an open canvas. You let me know who you are, and do know the formality of these questions are purely to figure out who you are so I can work in some way for you to bring out what's going to do something that's going to help both of us.
So let's go down the hypothetical a little bit and say that, okay, somebody's starting to put this type of environment together, right? They're supporting this type of conversation, communication with their teams. There's a couple different books that you've written. You've written a number of books, one about, well, all sorts of things. But the thing that's coming to mind here is how if you create a situation like that, how it might end up with different people seeing the situation differently at
Yeah.
work. And now that potentially is a breeding ground for conflict. I guess it's less about how do you avoid that disagreement, but how do you help someone stay engaged during that in a constructive way instead of becoming defensive or shutting down if that's the type of environment that you're trying to create.
Who are you imagining having the disagreement? I just want to make sure we're on the same page here.
Let's go with that hypothetical and say, okay, you've got your manager who's managing 30 people or so. By having those conversations and fostering that type of environment, you get to a point where two of the employees or three of the employees or cliques of employees all of a sudden have different motivations that are influencing them in different ways and potentially become points of friction.
Yeah.
Again, just a hypothetical here.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
I'm kind of I'm wondering what that might look like, how to navigate that type of situation.
Yeah, so you can imagine insufficient financial resources to actually reward people. You can imagine if you're talking about social status increases that people are seeking. There's only so many amazing parking places right next to the building that are underneath the umbrella, the awning, so that the car doesn't get ruined by hail and snow and all this that happens here. This is great. So once you, as a manager, once you can map out, create a mental map of what are the motivations and what are people doing in the workplace, then all of a sudden you can see the gestalt. You can see the bigger picture in terms of, okay, there's no conflicts here, no conflicts here, no conflicts here. There's a serious competition for scarce resources here. This is great because, I mean, really, at the level of the group or the team or the organization, you want to see, like, you're hoping that you get the individual diversity to be present, and then you can see, like, where are the scarce resources. And so now, like, in terms of, all right, as resources come in, this is where it has to go that happens here. And you're able to have a promissory note with people. You can be future oriented and say, um, the three of you, clearly, like, what's most important to you ends up being is you want a title that's commensurate with your ability, your expertise, your knowledge, and the years of tenure that you've given to this organization, which is amazing that happens here. Here's what I want to tell you. We have limited opportunities available because there's a small number of people in this organization. But this is my multi-year plan for what I'm imagining. And I want you, because this is a motivator for you, to help me develop this, and we can kind of co-create, like, what opportunities can exist, so that as you kind of level up in your skills, you can acquire the things that you want to, right? You earn them, and then you get the things that you want there. And so maybe you end up, this is how universities start. It started with having a dean, a provost, and then you have a vice president and a president. And all of a sudden, all of this administrative bloat appear where you have vice provosts and assistant deans that happen here. And I'm not sure the origin of all these positions. But if it stemmed from the conversation we're having right now, in terms of there are a lot of people that wanted to be in administrative positions, and a lot of people had great visions, which is not the case at my university. That's why we created all those positions. But if you're having this transparent conversation with a bunch of people that love status, and you're creating positions because you see something, you want to develop something, I think it's going to be amazing, so I'm going to create a position for you. That's the way to do it, because that's not bloat. That's basically is like, we are serving as architects, and we started with a little bodega, and now we're trying to create La Sagrada Familia in terms of, like, adding layers and levels that happen here. But it's because you've never been in this organization before. The organization the DNA is changing because of you, and I want you to be rewarded for the contributions you're making. When you say all of that, you're telling people, is that I understand what your needs are. I understand what you're offering. And it's not empty promises. It's very specialized to the exact offerings of an individual.
A lot of thoughts that are kind of going through my head, and I don't know where to land. So I'm just going to kind of let them ruminate for a little bit. You've been in this space for a number of years, done extensive research. You've got the wellbeing clinic. What are some of the opportunities that you're seeing emerge with, you write a lot about curiosity and meaning, and that's kind of where my mind was going with that. Is what you're talking about is finding different ways, or at least it sounds to me, is finding different ways to connect to people's meaning or their purpose, the things that are
Yeah,
motivating
sources
them.
of meaning. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you look at those sources of meaning, like what we've already kind of talked about, like what maybe gets misunderstood or misapplied, but I don't know how to word this, but I'm keep coming back to meaning. Something about what you were saying there was drawing me to meaning.
I mean, there's a ton of meaning making that happens. and I think we have to label it when it occurs, right? So just let's like pivot for a tiny bit into the world of artificial intelligence, right?
Yeah.
So we'll get away from the very simplistic discussion of like thumbs up, thumbs down, is in terms of how it's operating, and say to ourselves, if we're talking about sources of meaning and we're talking about the workplace, there are skills that have to be developed because the environment is regularly changing. And even if the environment isn't changing, you have to be aware of what parts of the environment are stable. And so you constantly have to have your finger on fluxes and pulses that are happening in society, in individuals, in groups. And, you know, we're a flat world right now. So in terms of when I wake up on the East Coast in Washington, D.C., I'm affected by what happens in Japan and Hong Kong that happens there. And all of us are, just some of us a little bit more directly in the business world, but we're all being affected by it. And so in this environment, when you have AI, and you get to actually use this to level up your skills in context on a regular basis, and you have it available 24/7. So if you wake up ruminating in the middle of the night and wondering, like, shoot, into when I see this political unrest that's happening in Iran, and I'm not really sure what resources in Iran are relevant to this paper mill company that I'm working at that happens here, is like you could just crunch the questions in AI at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're having your sweaty nightmare and say, listen, here's what I have on task for me tomorrow. Here's who I'm meeting with tomorrow. This is the companies that they're part of. Go online, look at what their job responsibilities are, look at what they've been involved in lately in terms of deal making and things that they're considering, and let me know what should I be considering that I haven't contemplated that are related to what's happening with the unrest in Iran right now. Talking about like what a wondrous environment as opposed to trying to hire a international expert in diplomatic relations, is that you have this availability in terms of synthesizing patterns across seemingly irrelevant areas of the world, and you can be leveling up your skill as an opening before you start your day. And now I can go to sleep, read that when I wake up, and all of a sudden I am in such a laser powerful position for my mind to be kind of this revving with exciting possibilities. And that's how I view in terms of sources of meaning and meaning making that can occur round the clock in a very efficient manner that no one could have imagined even 10 years ago.
The other thing that you mentioned there, if I do wake up in the middle of the night with that, being able to write it down somewhere, kind of pulling that out, keeps the mind
Yeah.
from ruminating. And so to not only be able to just, okay, write it down on a yellow notepad and come back to it later, but to be able to actually see, my risk would be if I put it into the models and asked the questions and said, hey, here's kind of what I'm thinking. Now all of a sudden, now I'm engaging with it, and my mind is going the opposite way. Instead of saying, okay, put this aside, go back to sleep, it's now 3 a.m. and my mind's going 17 different ways.
Yeah, but you could even see from your facial expressions as you're talking is like, all right, you just moved from looming anxiety to excitement, intrigue, and wonder. And and as much as I love sleep hygiene, I am a curiosity researcher. So if you're going to have this injection of wonder over brooding at 3 o'clock in the morning, I mean, that's just a net win for society. And really what it comes down to is, for people that are listening to this conversation, is realize like you have, with AI at your disposal, you have more agency to transform the self-talk and mental space that you're in with these tools. But you have to be thinking about how, what is the emotional state that I'm experiencing right now, and what's the one that I want to move towards. And what I just did right there is give you a real world kind of example where, while there's volatility in the world, we're using it to help us think and work better the next day. And that's where you get kind of this nice interface of psychology in the workplace. I know there's a lot there.
There's a lot there, but oh man, like that's what I'm saying. Like my mind's going 17 different ways. But let's talk there for a moment. One of the things that you said was you study curiosity. I'm curious, what originally pulled you toward studying curiosity as something more than personality traits, or, especially when we look at curiosity with, like you just gave one example of how some of the new tools that are being introduced and implemented throughout society, curiosity can work to your benefit. And then when we look at things like performance driven behavior or professional settings, what does that curiosity component look like, or what can it look like with the right reinforcement?
Yeah, I mean the thing right from the beginning. I mean, I have the paper that I was working on in 1998 in my first semester of grad school psychological assessment course to get my PhD in clinical psychology, and then in that paper was was a description of when people experience an approach avoidance conflict. The example that I usually give, which is kind of just a strange, very odd-like example, is you're walking down the street to go to whatever, get a coffee, go to work, go to the gym, and then you see someone passing by that's wearing your favorite band on a concert T-shirt, and this is a complete stranger. And you're just like, and if you have like me, like a very obscure punk rock musical taste, and you see someone that wears a Pixie shirt, your just head explodes. You're like, oh my god, I totally want to approach them and say like, what is your favorite song on insert whatever album, bossa nova. And so it's an approach avoidance conflict. You want to avoid the situation because it's weird, it's strange, it's evokes a lot of social anxiety. I don't want to be rejected, in midday with all this enthusiasm bubbling inside me. And there's this approach because, listen, when you find someone that loves something very unusual, obscure that you do, you just want to connect with them right away. So in these approach avoidance conflicts, one of the fundamental emotions that can be turned on like a dial is your curiosity. And curiosity can override fear or anxiety, especially when you're talking about moments. And so I wrote about this in my first year. And so right from the beginning, I didn't articulate it as well as I do now, is like, this is a strategy to deal with threats, difficulties, and challenges. And it's not that it takes us away from it, it changes our mindset for how we enter situations. And I think if you view curiosity as one of the greatest psychological tools that costs nothing other than time, a slight bit of time and energy, in terms of the wide ranging benefits, this is just something people have to be talking about on a regular basis in every single life domain.
So I'm thinking of like if you have a spectrum of no curiosity to full throttle curiosity, right? The extreme of either, I think, may not be ideal. So finding something in the middle that makes sense for individual context, like you were saying with that person with the T-shirt. Yeah, the first thing, like when you were telling that, the first thing that comes to my mind is the thought. It's like you see then your friend, like we
Right.
have something in common. Like I want to approach you, but if I run up to you screaming and singing my favorite song, you're going to run the other way. So finding somewhere on that spectrum that says like what's the appropriate level to express that curiosity or to lean into that. And so when we think about, or when I think about that sort of spectrum perspective, what's one way that someone can experiment with that curiosity during a normal workday without necessarily, well, first without adding cognitive load? Like if especially depending on the task, whether you're on a small organization with 20 people on your team or you're a large organization with thousands of people, there are likely going to be constraints on what to the extent that you can lean into that curiosity. But
Yeah.
I'm curious to you, what would that look like?
No, this is good. So it's funny. The first thing that I think of is be careful of reply all, because what intrigues you is there is a low likelihood that it's automatically going to intrigue lots of other people. So that's your first thing right there, is not everyone has to know everything that interests you. Um, we are all fascinated by a wide range of things. And if there are still bookstores that exist, I know you live near Powell, so that's actually the ultimate bookstore. But if you walk in there and you go to the magazine rack, if there's a large range of strange magazines because lots of people have different interests. So someone picks up Guitar Weekly, another person picks Civil War Digest, another person's Reader's Digest, Men's Fitness, Women's Fitness, Karate magazine that happens here. Nobody goes into a magazine rack and reads from left to right everything that's there because we just don't have those range of. So it's good to start with. If you're going to eventually share your curiosities to someone else, or the things that evoke curiosity, do realize you have to get people curious about what you're curious about. So don't assume the automaticity of it that happens there. So that would be my first strategy that goes there. The second one is, if you want to attract other people, your job really is to figure out what makes them curious as opposed to imposing your curiosity. This is the great seduction tool. And we're not talking about romantic relationships. We're just talking about humans interacting with humans. And I think most people make the mistake of, something really interesting happened to me. I was thinking about something really interesting. I got to tell you. And it's the other way around. Like, you have to switch the directional arrows, which is like, hey, I haven't seen you in 37 hours right now. I know we work in the same workplace. What have I missed that's excited you since the last time I saw you? Do you know how people love that question? Do you know how people rarely get that question? People get the question of, how have you been? It's so globular that most people, I'm going to come up with the scientifically precise number of 87.6% of people say, I'm good or I'm fine. Because there's no handhold there. But if you asked, what's been exciting you in that brain of yours since the last time I saw you, you're going to get people to be like, I'm so glad you asked. And you have no idea what the next thing is going to come out of their mouth that happens there. So that is like the ultimate social skill for playing with your curiosity. In this realm, when you are other focused with your curiosity, I don't think it's the middle, like that inverted U, where the mid range of curiosity is the action. Being incurious is problematic. Being excessively curious is a problem. I actually think you can be like really at the far end of that spectrum, like super highly curious, and you're going to attract people because it's in the service of getting to know them, and people love that stuff.
All right. So, what are you currently curious about? In all the work that you're looking at, all the research that you're doing, the books that you've written or are writing, what are you curious about?
I'm really interested right now. Well, I'm in the middle of writing my next book, almost finished with the first draft of it. Really interested in how to help people think about their legacies without obsessing about their mortality. And so I
Oh,
and so I really love the idea. I mean, I've gotten a bunch of emails in the last couple weeks, for some strange reason, people in their 70s who just wanted to meet with me, talk to me about kind of like, what do I do with my life? And when I got the first email, because it became public that I'm writing a book about purpose. And the first email, it said, you know, age 72, I want to meet to talk about what to do with my life. And I had this like natural reaction. I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, you're 72. And then I sat on it and I slept on it. And I'm like, I don't know who this person is, but that's really cool. I really hope when I'm 72, I have the humility and I have this sense of this the sense of drive and and excitement and agency to say that I'm still trying to figure out like what I want to do with my life, and I want to hear from someone else and not just like think about that I have enough of the answers because I've been on the earth for 7 decades. And so in this singular question, and have not met any of these 4 or 5 individuals yet, just reach out to them, is a great conversation about, these are people that have a desire to seek legacy, but don't necessarily know what their legacy is. And they're in the 7th decade. I think for those of us that are younger, and I'm not that young, but I am younger, is you would think that you get this down by now, by 7 decades. And I think there's a lot of presumptions that we have about humanity, about, wisdom is correlated with age, and curiosity is inversely related to age. And, the more we know, the better our prediction models are, as opposed to, the idea of Picasso and Louis Pasteur, who said, the more I know, the less that I realize that I do know. So you have these competing ideas about the world, and I like the notion that people are seeking purpose at every stage of their lives, and I really kind of like am intrigued about like what's the best way of helping people so that with whatever time you have remaining or available in your life, you can really try to leave. And it's really subjective. You can leave an imprint on this world such that you are in the mind of one or more other people when you go. And you don't have to have kids. It's just like you've done something to affect and leave an echo in your wake. Either I
Oh,
said
that's my
something
internet.
completely mind blowing or your camera froze. Mentally, I'm going to go with the former. I just realized I'm now on a podcast by myself, which doesn't bother me in the slightest.
Wow. So apparently I don't know if my internet or the platform or something, but it cut out there.
Well, I went with it, so we're fine.
Awesome. I really hope that it did, because I lost everything right when you said it's really subjective, and then it went away, and I was like, oh man.
I said something cute while you froze, so when you watch the video, I think you can still keep it.
Awesome. Excellent. All right. So we talked about leading with that curiosity, and there's two things that are coming to mind. One of them, I just was watching a TV show on Netflix, and the guy leaves a little words of wisdom that says it's never too late to start a new career or to start over or something like that. And that's kind of what came to mind is, yeah, you're in your 70s and you don't have to. It's not too late to start something new or to find whatever your purpose is. So do you see a lot of that curiosity in the workplace, in organizations, in the people the people in the places that you interview and that you research?
No, I mean, the quick answer is no, and I think it's because we put an overemphasis on problem solving and not asking the questions initially. And I think we have to like really kind of like recalibrate the way we think about these things. Is if you go back to our conversation about AI, you go back to an organization dealing with a regularly volatile flux environment, and really it comes down to whoever asks the best questions initially is going to come up with the greatest number of possibilities, and in those possibilities becomes you have to make decisions between what are you going to focus your limited amount of time, energy, and attention on. And if we spend all of our time on great decisions, well, we're not leaving enough room for the initial part of the sequence. Like, what are you thinking about and asking in the first hand?
The word that's coming to mind right now is cognitive flexibility, and allowing that curiosity to sort of have the ability to move. I don't know if I
Yeah,
made sense with that.
yeah. Well, there's also is that we always have competition for our mind. We've got you talked earlier about kind of like how do we deal with this fact that you know there's not a work version of us, there's not a home version of us. We have competing life domains. You've got your friends, you've got your family, you've got your workplace, you've got your physical health, with whatever, however it is that you express that or don't express that, it's still a part of your life that happens there. You've got at least three basic psychological needs: need to belong, need to feel a sense of competence, need to feel a sense of autonomy. Carol Dweck adds a couple other ones: need for significance, the need for joy. Whether you argue, whether you agree or disagree about them as being needs, the thing is that they compete in terms of what is of primacy at the current point in time. Now, one part of that will be you'll have strong environments that push for certain parts of your personality, and sometimes internally there's like this this like bubbling volcano in terms of like right now there's nothing I crave more now than joy. And that in that case, doesn't mean you have to be like a reckless 5-year-old kid, like, just running around in a sprinkler. It could just like whatever the thing is, like maybe you just need to like run across the street and just go like watch some birds, like, just listen to them for a little bit that happens there. Maybe just jump on a bike and just like go downhill for like a couple of minutes that happen there. Whatever it is that happens. It's just like, we have to get better at being flexible in terms of we don't want the same things. We don't do good at doing things the same way for 8-hour chunks, even if there are 8-hour workdays.
Okay, so I mean, even just the cognitive load of trying to switch from one thing to another task, whether it's in the same work environment or you're at work and you get a phone call from something out, from friends or family, like the shifting can be a lot. And so I like the idea of recalibrating, whether that's going outside, like you said, going for a walk or just going out, whatever it is.
Well, there's something interesting in there as well, right? Because something we haven't talked about yet is there's always trade-offs. And this is, I've written I've been writing articles about this quite regularly, and I'm still have a number more in the queue about this. Is what you just described, there is a psychological cost, and it's called the resumption lag. And so we know that when you switch gears to grab that phone call from grandma while you're in the middle of the workplace, you don't just hang up the phone, smile, and then all of a sudden, like Bugs Bunny, just typing away at like 120 words per minute as soon as after. There's a lag of like, okay, wait, hold on, switch gears here. Wait, what was I working on? What was I thinking about here? So that's a real price that happens here. And what I would want to make an argument for, and I would love people to comment and agree or disagree with this, is that let's appreciate inefficiencies more when it comes to um, enlivening us and giving us like an enhanced experience here and there over the course of our days, over trying to reduce resumption lags to near zero.
Ooh, I like that. I also like the way that you frame that. You want people to either agree with it or disagree with it. And that's one of the things that I appreciate about the approach that you take. And even in the books that you've written, you can sort of hear there's a little bit of, well, even your Substack called Provoked, there's a little bit of that provocation where it's like not accepting something at face value. It's learning what all that messy boundary or differentiation is between that.
Yeah, I'm a huge all I ask for everyone, whether I'm in the equation or not, arguing, disagreeing, conflict, is just begin with the assumption of positive intent. And so when people disagree with me, like I love it, but just know that the opener is really important, right? You mentioned before, like how do you bring people's defenses down? Is when people say this topic is so important to me. You're talking about psychopathy, and the idea of psychopathy in the workplace is so important to me because I don't want to see anyone get hurt. And when you said, because I had written this relatively recently, that you should wish for all of your friends not to be a zero on a narcissism scale. Definitely don't want them to be an 80, 90, or 100, but you don't want them to be a zero. And it got a lot of criticism. And most criticism sounded like this, which was, I'll go back to this imaginary person in a second, which was, this person must be narcissistic who's talking about this. They clearly aren't like a well-trained psychologist because narcissism is always bad. Like narcissism is not the same thing as confidence. You don't know what you're talking about. I just checked. You never wrote a book on narcissism. This is not your area that happens there. These are not ways to have conflict. But when you say that I'm interested in psychopathy, narcissism in the workplace, I don't want to see anyone get hurt. So I wonder, like when you say narcissism shouldn't be zero, how are you accounting for the fact that when I think about narcissism, I think about people getting hurt? Now all of a sudden, yeah, we're about to have a cool conversation, and my guess is, based on something like that opening, is you're going to tell me about a situation that I didn't consider and doesn't fit under my framework. And that's amazing, because no framework in the world of psychology should 100% cover individuals and situations.
Well, yeah, like what we were talking about earlier, that sort of spectrum. All of it is probably not ideal. None of it is probably not ideal. And depending on the context, where does it fit on that scale, on that flow?
And yet, like people really love to be cognitive misers. And so black and white thinking offers that. So it's really easy to say, this is the right way to think about this issue. And if you don't think that way, you're on the wrong side of history. And what that doesn't leave room for is, what vantage points did you miss? Was there somebody on the rooftop 3 blocks away? Was there someone in Sri Lanka who's, farming like in the back of their house, and they heard the same issue and they are just not thinking about it from your perspective at all that happens there? You don't leave room for these wide range of perspectives and vantage points that exist for every issue.
Okay, so I'm curious, with writing that, putting it out there, getting the feedback or the conversations with people about not having the zero narcissism component. I don't know that there's any research to back this up. This is just merely a subjective question, but what is a good number, or what is a good range? Like, is it closer to 0? Is it closer to 25, 100%? Or is that also contextual?
Yeah. I love coming up with arbitrary numbers, as you know, because you read some of these Substack articles that I write. They're fun because they set up debates, right? So if I was asked on the spot right now to come up with a number, I would say you want to be like a 20 on a 100-point scale
Okay.
that goes in there, right? So it's definitely closer to 0 that happens there. But when you're at 0, I want you to have a little bit of grandiosity, because grandiosity is like imagining a bigger version of yourself with your strengths, but they're fully capable. You've got environmental supports. You've got people that have your back. You have people that say, listen, unconditionally, like for the next 6 months, I got you covered. Like, go experiment, go try new things that happens there. And you've got this internally. And I sort of wish that on everybody. Like, we come from a wide range. Some of us come from opportunity rich environments. Some of us come from opportunity scarce environments. You could think of it as, impoverished environments or rich environments. I don't like that terminology because it's kind of been abused a little bit. And so in this case, I want people in all of these environments with bad parents, good parents, amazing parents, terrible parents, to have a little bit of sense of inflated sense of self, a little bit, right? The 20 out of 100-point scale, where you're going to get some traction to start doing things that happens there. And I don't want you to be a 0. I don't want you to wait till you're chosen, which is, the advice that I always give to when I work with my college students, or I'm working with high schoolers to help them with their college applications, is I say, like, I regularly give advice like, don't wait to be picked, because you never know what the criteria are. And you know, most of the universe, it was people that looked like you and me, Matt, that happened there. Things are changing, a little bit at a time that happens there, but you never know what's the thing that people are looking for. And so the thing is just tiny experiments.
Well, and to sort of go back to what we were talking about at the start of the conversation about creating that environment for whether that authenticity component, like how you choosing how you show up. And then, as in that hypothetical, if you're the manager, how do you create that environment? You want to have a little bit of that 20%, that 20% in there, because otherwise, to me, that's related to advocating for yourself. And there's an extent of it
Yes.
that you want to have that says, I do want to ultimately or eventually get that position right there. It's not so high at the 80 to 100 that says, I earn that, or I'm
I deserve it.
entitled, I deserve it, I'm entitled to it right now. But it's being able to have that conversation that says, that's where I want to go. So there is that little bit of a, yeah, I'm speaking up and advocating for myself, the authentic part of me that says that's ideally where I want, the direction I want to be going. And I don't know, to me, that just kind of connected back. Curious for any thoughts on that.
No, yeah, yeah. And in terms of like leadership advice, it's like, be really careful for misinterpreting the false proxy that people that are loud and people that are excitable are the best people for whatever the thing is that you're doing, and whatever input you're looking for in the conversation. I mean, one thing that I do, in whether I'm consulting for an organization or I'm in a classroom in a workshop, is I specifically say, okay, seems like most people are on the same page about here. That worries me. I'm looking for minorities of one, like singular people here that are afraid to say something because they hold a view different than else. And everyone else here, if someone's about to say something, all I ask is you be open minded, because we should not be 100% on the same page. And when those people speak in that moment, whatever they look like, whatever their background is, whatever their demographics are that happens here, something magical appears in the conversation. And if you can prevent people from all of a sudden, like, you know, creating fists, like, stiffening up and tightening up, and you just be like, okay, all right, listen, I don't agree 100%, but I like this angle. Let's work from that. Like, you've been doing this whole conversation. Like, okay, let me add a little bit to like what you said. This is what that made me think. And that's the beauty of cognitive diversity. And when a leader, manager, someone who's at the helm, end of the table, creates a space for that to happen, you just made the group smarter.
Todd, I could talk with you, ask questions all day long. But I also want to be mindful and respectful of your time. As we close out the episode, what practical advice would you, and this is a very broad question, so I apologize for that. No, I don't. I don't. No, this is a very broad question.
Excellent.
Go wherever you want with it. What practical advice so with Science for Work, our mission, our intent is to make work better. And we've gone a lot of different ways today. We talked about curiosity. We talked about narcissism. We talked about cognitive load, and just all over the place. For the listener that's out there that's listening to this conversation, what would be a takeaway that you would want them to walk away with in a way that they can make work better, that they can make their work environment or the way that they show up to work just a little bit better?
I'm going to go a totally different direction from anything we've talked about so far, just because just for some reason it popped into my head. You're going to feel threatened at work. Your ego is going to get hurt. Someone's going to say something that bothers you. You're going to really mess up at something that happens here. Whatever it is. It could just be someone said something that stung and they didn't do it intentionally. Whatever it is, one thing that we know from science is you can protect and heal yourself by going to a different part of your life and having yourself be strong, feel satisfied, or feel like healthy in that area. And you don't have to go back to work to go heal yourself and go defend yourself for you to actually be a whole person that's satisfied. And so use the other parts of your life to help your work life. And so if you get stung at work, if you mess up at work, and if you got a kid at home, you know what? Have like the greatest laughter and like the thickest, fattest, juiciest hug with them. And if you don't have a kid at home and you go to the gym, choose the thing that makes you like endorphin crazy, whatever it is, right? If it's bicep curls, if it's jumping on the bike that happens there, if you don't exercising, just lay on a text to someone that like you really love, like you really care about, and say, listen, I needed a jolt of joy today and I knew I wanted to reach out to somebody and you were the first person that I thought of. You do that and you will find quicker, faster repairs. And because these ruptures will be less impactful in reducing your quality of life.
It's awesome. I love that. Todd, where can people find more of your work, continue learning from you? You said you have an upcoming book. Where can people learn more?
Best place is I've got a Substack. It's called Provoked. Just all you got to probably have to do is just put Substack Provoked Todd Kashdan in somewhere online, and you'll probably run into it. And all my latest ideas, I shove them in there.
Awesome. We'll make sure to include a link to that in the show notes. This has been a fun conversation. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I appreciate your ideas. And we went a lot of different ways. I really enjoyed it. I hope you did too.
That is what I want for every conversation. So thank you for facilitating that, Matt.
Awesome. Thanks for listening to the Science for Work podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing it or leaving a review. It might just be the opportunity that helps someone else discover evidence-based insights they can use in their work. For more research-backed resources, articles, and tools, or to get involved with the Science for Work community, visit us at ScienceForWork.com. A special thanks to our guest and to the entire Science for Work team. Science for Work is an independent, nonprofit foundation of evidence-based practitioners who want to make work better.